The unexpected visitor of the night was quiet, the kind of stillness that made every sound seem louder. The moonlight shone through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. In this peaceful moment, there was nothing to expect, no reason to worry. But then, a loud knock echoed through the house. Startled, the man stood up from his chair, his heart beating faster. He was alone, no visitors, no calls, just the usual quiet evening. He walked slowly to the door, wondering who it could be at this hour. It was late, far too late for anyone to come by. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the doorknob. As he opened the door, his eyes widened in shock. A woman stood in front of him, her face pale, her clothes torn, and her hair wild. She was holding a small child tightly in her arms. The child's wide, innocent eyes looked up at him, confused and scared. The woman's breathing was shallow, as if she had been running for a long time. She didn't say anything at first. She just stared at him, her eyes filled with fear. He stood frozen, unsure of what to do. It was as if time itself had stopped. But then, with a desperate look in her eyes, the woman spoke, her voice trembling. "Please, don't let them take her." The words hit him like a punch to the chest. The tone of her voice was not just one of fear, but of pleading, as if her life and the life of the child depended on his next action. He didn't know who they were or who the woman was running from, but something inside him told him that this was no ordinary situation. Before he could say anything, the woman collapsed. At his feet, still clutching the child. Her body seemed to give out, as if the weight of what she had been through was finally too much to bear. The child, still in her arms, began to cry, her tiny hands reaching out for comfort. The man's heart raced, and he bent down to help her. "Who's after you?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "Who's trying to take you?" The woman took a deep breath and looked up at him, her face filled with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. "They're coming. They'll find us." She paused for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "They've been looking for us for a long time. They won't stop." He helped her to her feet, his mind racing with questions. He could hear the child's soft sobs and the woman's quick breaths. There was something in the air, something he couldn't place, but it was clear that they were in danger. The woman's eyes darted to the street behind her. The man followed her gaze, but the street was empty. The neighborhood, usually calm and quiet, seemed strangely silent now. He could feel the tension building, a sense of urgency pressing down on him. The door stood open behind him, and he could see the room he'd been in just moments ago. Now feeling like a faraway world, he stepped outside and closed the door behind him, keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings. The woman's eyes never left him as she clutched her child tighter, as if the child was the only thing keeping her from breaking down completely. "I need to know who's after you," he said, his voice more firm now. "Who are they?" She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw a flash of something else, something deeper, a secret she was holding back. "They're not from here," she said softly, "not from this world." The man stared at her, confused. "What do you mean, not from this world?" The woman's face went pale as she glanced over her shoulder once more. Her hands were shaking now, and the child, still in her arms, had gone quiet. Sensing the tension in the air, "They're coming," she whispered again. "They'll take her from me. Please, you have to hide us. You have to protect her." Her words were so strange, so impossible to understand, that the man almost thought he had misunderstood. But the look in her eyes, the way her voice shook, told him that she was not lying. Whoever was after them was not someone he could reason with, and the woman's fear was real. He glanced at the child, still clinging to the woman. The child's eyes were filled with innocence, but there was something else, a strange sense of calm, as if she knew more than she should. It made him uneasy. What was this child's connection to the danger the woman spoke of? "I don't know what's going on, but I'll help you," he said, his voice steady despite the confusion in his mind. "You're safe here for now." But even as the words left his mouth, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far bigger than he could imagine. The woman and child had shown up at his door, and now he was in their world, a world he had no idea existed. And whatever was coming for them, he was about to find out the hard way. "Thank you," the woman whispered, her voice filled with relief and exhaustion. But the fear in her eyes never left. They weren't safe, not yet, and she knew it. The chase begins. The man barely had time to process what had just happened. The woman's warning echoed in his mind, but he pushed it aside. There was no time for confusion, no time to wonder what she had meant when she said they're not from this world. The night was far from over, and danger was closing in fast. He led her inside, urging her to sit down while he scanned the streets through the window. The silence in the house felt like a lie. Everything was too still. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The woman sat nervously, cradling the child in her arms, her eyes darting to the door as though she expected someone to break it down at any moment. The man turned to her, trying to calm the frantic energy that seemed to surround them. "How long do we have?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with concern. Her eyes filled with fear as she stared at the door. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They're always watching. They've been tracking us for months, maybe longer. If we stay here, they'll find us." The man swallowed hard. The air around them felt thick, heavy with tension. He didn't know who they were, but it was clear that these were no ordinary pursuers. And yet, as much as he wanted to help, he had no idea how. He wasn't trained for this kind of situation. "What do we do?" he asked, his mind racing for a plan. "We need to leave, now." She stood up abruptly, her hands shaking as she pulled the child closer. "There's no time to waste. They'll be here soon." The urgency in her voice made him act before thinking. He grabbed a jacket, turned off the lights, and motioned for her to follow. The woman nodded, but there was something in her eyes, a mix of fear and regret, as though she knew that running wouldn't solve everything. They moved quickly, silently, through the back door. The cold night air hit them like a slap to the face, but it wasn't the cold that made his skin crawl. It was the overwhelming sense that they weren't alone. He could feel eyes on them, lurking just out of sight. He turned to the woman, trying to steady his breath. "Where do we go?" he asked. "Where can we hide?" She hesitated for a moment, as if calculating their options. "There's a place," she said. "It's a safe house. But we have to be careful. If they're following us, they'll know where we're going." As she spoke, a noise shattered the silence, a low, menacing hum, almost like a distant engine. The man's heart skipped a beat. The sound was growing closer. "They're here," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "They've found us." The man's instincts kicked in. He didn't know who was after them, but he didn't need to know. He could feel the danger closing in around them, and that was enough. They had to move fast. "Come on," he urged, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the alley behind the house. The child in her arms whimpered softly, but she said nothing. It was as if the child knew what was happening, as though she understood the danger better than anyone. They hurried down the alley, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth beneath them. The man glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see a group of men in black suits or strange vehicles following them. But there was nothing, just the deepening shadows of the night. "I think we're safe for now," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. He didn't trust the silence. It was too perfect, too still. The woman shook her head. "No, they're already here. They know where we are." Her eyes darted to the end of the alley, where the streetlights flickered dimly. "We don't have much time." The hum from earlier was louder now, unmistakable. It wasn't just the sound of an engine, it was something mechanical, otherworldly, like something built for a purpose the man could not understand. Suddenly, a bright light appeared at the far end of the alley. It was blinding, moving toward them at an alarming speed. The man's heart raced, and his instincts screamed at him to run. "We have to move now," he shouted. But before they could take another step, the light flashed again, closer this time. There was a crackling sound in the air, like electricity building up in the atmosphere. He felt the hairs on his neck stand on end. Without warning, a figure stepped out from the shadows, tall and shadowed, wearing dark, sleek clothing. The man couldn't make out any details, but he could feel the cold, calculating energy of the figure. This wasn't just someone looking for a runaway. This was something much worse. "Run," the woman whispered, her voice urgent. She looked at the man with a mixture of fear and determination. "We can't stop them. They won't stop until they have her." Before he could respond, the figure stepped forward, its face hidden under a mask. The man could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, and he realized, with a sinking feeling, that the woman had been right. There was no hiding, there was no escaping. The child, still in her arms, stared at the man, her gaze impossibly calm. She didn't seem afraid, but the man was terrified. Who were these people? Why did they want the child? And most importantly, how were they supposed to survive this? The woman's grip tightened on the child. "Don't let them take her," she pleaded, her voice shaking. It was too late to turn back. The chase had already begun. A dangerous escape. The man's heart raced, his breath shallow as he stood frozen in place. The mysterious figure moved toward them, its presence like an ominous shadow in the alley. The lights grew brighter, casting an eerie glow on the walls around them. The woman's face was filled with fear, but there was something else, something almost resigned. She knew they couldn't outrun what was coming, without another word. The woman grabbed his arm, her fingers cold and shaking. "We have to go now," she urged, her voice barely more than a whisper. The child in her arms clung to her tightly, as if sensing the urgency of the moment. The man didn't need any more prompting. Adrenaline surged through him as he turned and sprinted down the alley, pushing the woman ahead of him. Every step felt like it could be their last. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the narrow space, but in the distance, the hum of the approaching light grew louder, more insistent. It was as though something was chasing them from the shadows. He risked a glance over his shoulder and saw the figure still advancing, its body cloaked in darkness. It didn't hurry, but its pace was unnervingly steady, its presence relentless. The man's mind raced, trying to find a way out, a way to lose their pursuers in the maze of city streets. "Where do we go?" he gasped, still running, still pulling the woman along. "You said there's a safe house. Is it far?" The woman's voice was tight with panic. "Not far, just a few blocks. But we'll never make it If they catch up. He pushed himself harder, his legs burning with the effort. The air felt thick, like they were running through water. Every corner they turned only seemed to bring them closer to danger, but he could see the promise of safety ahead of her. Dimly lit street lined with old warehouses, their windows dark. "We're almost there," the woman urged, though her voice wavered. The street felt abandoned, almost too quiet, but that made the man feel even more uneasy. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. They reached the end of the alley and rounded a corner, ducking into the shadow of the old buildings. The woman's grip tightened on the child as she looked up at the man, her face a mixture of hope and fear. Just as they turned into the shelter of the shadows, they heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind them. They weren't alone. The figure, now joined by others, had picked up its pace. The man's blood ran cold as he realized they were closing in. "Get inside," the woman urged. "There's a door at the back. Hurry." They reached an old, rusted door at the back of one of the buildings. The woman's hands fumbled with the handle, her breath coming fast and uneven. The man glanced around, trying to spot any other escape routes, but the world felt like it was closing in. Every second, they were running out of time. With a quiet click, the door creaked open. The woman rushed inside, pulling the child with her, and the man followed. The door shut behind them with a soft thud, and they found themselves in complete darkness. It was quiet, eerily so. The man's heart still pounded in his chest, and he could feel the sweat on his skin. The world outside was silent now, as though it had swallowed them whole. He waited for a sound, any sound, but there was nothing. Finally, the woman let out a breath and whispered, "We need to move quickly. This place won't stay hidden for long." She seemed more composed now, though still trembling. The man glanced around, trying to get his bearings in the pitch-black darkness. He could barely make out the outline of old crates, rusted machinery, and what appeared to be a staircase leading up. He felt a sense of urgency pressing against him. "We don't have much time," she added, her voice low but urgent. "They'll be looking for us already. We need to stay ahead of them." The man's mind raced, trying to process everything she had said. What was it about this child that made her so valuable? Who were these people hunting them, and why was the woman so sure they were capable of tracking them, no matter where they went? He reached out, grabbing her arm gently. "What's going on?" His voice cracked with frustration. "Who are they? Why do they want you and the child?" The woman was silent for a moment, her eyes still wide with fear. Then she took a deep breath and whispered, "They're part of an organization, a group that's been hunting us for years. They want her. Because she's special. She has powers. Powers that could change everything." The man's mind swirled. Powers? What kind of powers? And how was a child involved in this? He glanced at the girl in her arms. She was so young, so innocent looking. How could someone so small be connected to something so dangerous? The woman's gaze softened as she looked at the child. They'd been after her for a long time. She's the key to something much bigger, something they can control. If they get her, they'll use her powers to do terrible things. The man's stomach twisted at the thought. He didn't know what kind of powers the child had, but it was clear that whatever they were powerful enough to bring this entire situation crashing down on them, and there was no escaping it. "What now?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Now," she said, "we wait. We hope they don't find us here, but I know it won't be long before they're on our trail again." The man's heart sank as the weight of the moment hit him. They were running out of time. The chase had only just begun. The truth revealed the stillness of the old building felt suffocating. The man stood by the dimly lit corner, his body tense, his thoughts a swirl of confusion and fear. The woman had insisted that they stay hidden, but the air around them felt heavy, as though it too was waiting for something to happen. Every shadow seemed to grow larger, and every creak of the floorboards made his heart race. The only sound in the room was the woman's soft whisper as she rocked the child in her arms, trying to calm both the girl and herself. They had been in the hidden warehouse for what felt like hours, though it had only been a few minutes since they arrived. The uncertainty in the air made time feel like an endless stretch of waiting, each second dragging on with the weight of the danger closing in on them. The woman stood up suddenly, her hands still shaking, but her eyes now filled with a quiet, almost resigned determination. She walked toward the man, stopping just a few feet away, her gaze meeting his with an intensity that made him hold his breath. "They'll be here soon," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "I know it. They never stop." He stared at her, feeling the cold edge of fear slip into his own heart. "Who are they? What do they want with you, with her?" He pointed toward the child, who was still clinging to her mother's chest. The girl's gaze was strangely calm, too calm for someone so young, and it made the man shiver despite the warmth in the room. The woman hesitated, her lips parted as though she was trying to find the right words to explain, but there was a moment of silence before she spoke. "I told you they were after her because she's special," she began, her voice low, almost a whisper, as if the very words held a dangerous weight. "But I didn't tell you everything." The man's brow furrowed. He had been waiting for this, waiting for the moment when she would finally explain what was happening. And now that it was here, he realized just how little he understood. "The truth is," she continued, taking a deep breath, "my daughter is not just a child. She is ... different. She was born with abilities, powers that I don't fully understand, but they're dangerous, not just for us, but for everyone. There are people, an organization, who would do anything to control those powers." The man blinked, trying to process what she was saying. Abilities, powers. It sounded impossible, but as he looked at the child, who seemed so small and innocent, he couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that gnawed at him. "Abilities? What kind of abilities?" he asked, his voice tight with disbelief. The woman looked down at her daughter, her fingers brushing the child's hair softly. "I don't know exactly. She's only 6, but there have been moments, flashes of power. It's as if she can feel things that others can't. She senses things before they happen, knows things that aren't supposed to be known." The man's mind raced. What did that mean? How could a child have these kinds of abilities? And why hadn't anyone else noticed? "The organization after us," the woman went on, her tone darkening. "They call themselves the Collective. They've been hunting children like her for years. Children born with powers that could change the course of history. And they'll stop at nothing to capture them. If they get their hands on her, they'll use her to gain control over everything, to manipulate people, to take over entire governments, to reshape the world in their image." The words hit the man like a blow. He could hardly wrap his mind around the scale of what she was saying. A child with powers that could change the world. The idea seemed impossible, but the fear in the woman's eyes made him realize that this was no fantasy. This was real. The child shifted in her arms, and the man caught a glimpse of her face. There was an unsettling calm in her expression, as though she was aware of the weight of what was happening, as though she knew exactly what was at stake. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment it felt as if she was looking right through him. I don't know how they found us, the woman continued, breaking the silence. But they have. And now they'll stop at nothing to get her back. We can't hide forever. The man's thoughts were swirling. The weight of the situation was starting to sink in, and with it came a crushing realization. The woman wasn't just a mother protecting her child. She was a fugitive fleeing from an organization that had the resources and power to track them down no matter where they went. The magnitude of the danger was beyond anything he had ever imagined. What are we supposed to do? He asked, his voice quiet, a mix of fear and disbelief. The woman's face softened with a sadness that went beyond exhaustion. She took a step closer to him, her hand trembling as she placed it gently on his arm. I don't know if we can outrun them, but I do know one thing. If you don't help us now, we're all dead. They will take her, and everything will change. He met her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what he had just stepped into, but it was too late to back out now. Tell me what to do, he said, his voice steady, though his mind was still struggling to catch up with the chaos unfolding around him. The woman nodded, her eyes filled with both gratitude and fear. We need to get her to the last safe house. It's the only place we can hide if we can make it there. He swallowed hard. There was no going back now. The chase had only just begun, and he was in this whether he wanted to be or not. The child, the woman, and the forces hunting them, everything was part of something bigger, something that would change the world. But for now, all he could do was keep running, and hope they weren't too late. The pursuit intensifies. The dim glow of the streetlights barely lit the alley ahead, but the man didn't dare slow down. His pulse hammered in his ears, his feet pounding against the pavement with each hurried step. The woman was beside him, her grip tight on her daughter as they navigated the maze of narrow streets. They had to keep moving. There was no time to rest, no time to question what was happening. The danger was real, and it was closing in fast. The silence of the night was oppressive, as if the world had drawn its breath in a long, nervous pause. But just as quickly, the quiet was shattered by a low, mechanical hum. The sound was distant at first, but it grew louder, echoing through the alleys with a chilling, mechanical rhythm. The man's heart skipped a beat. He knew what that sound meant. It wasn't just the hum of a distant engine, it was something more, something far more menacing. They're coming, the woman breathed, her face pale in the moonlight. She kept looking over her shoulder, her eyes filled with dread. I told you they wouldn't stop. The man's mind raced. He didn't know who they were, this so-called collective, but he could feel their presence now, an almost tangible weight pressing down on him. They had been running for hours, trying to lose their pursuers in the labyrinth of city streets. But it felt like no matter how fast they moved, the shadows were always one step behind them. We need to find shelter, the woman said, her voice trembling. There's an old storage facility a few blocks up. It's hidden, but we can't stay out here too long. The man nodded, though he didn't know if it would make a difference. The hum of the engines was growing louder, closer. It wasn't just one vehicle now. It was a fleet, and they were all on their tail. The walls of the alley seemed to close in on them as they hurried toward the storage facility, but the man couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. They were being hunted, and the hunters were relentless. As they rounded a corner, the woman pulled him into the shadows of a crumbling building. Her breathing was quick and shallow, and the child in her arms had gone silent, her small body tense. The man glanced around frantically, trying to find an escape route, but there was nowhere to hide. The street was too exposed, and the facility they were heading for was still several blocks away. Then they heard a sharp, blaring siren, followed by a sudden burst of light that flooded the alley. The woman gasped, her body jerking back in panic. "They've found us," she whispered. Her words were a death sentence in the quiet of the night. The man's heart dropped. He could see the headlights of several vehicles now, their sleek, dark forms silhouetted against the night sky. They weren't just after them, they were closing in fast. The engines roared to life, the vehicles skimming the streets with unnatural precision. There was no escape, no way out. "Get down," he shouted, pulling the woman and the child into the shadows of a doorway. The cold concrete pressed against his back as they huddled together, trying to stay hidden. His breath caught in his throat as the headlights passed just inches away, the sharp beams cutting through the darkness like a knife. The vehicles rolled by, moving in perfect formation, their silence broken only by the occasional hum of the engines. "They're searching," the woman murmured. "They won't stop until they have her." The man could feel the sweat dripping down his forehead, his mind racing. Who were these people? What did they want with this child? And why was he involved in this nightmare? As the last of the vehicles passed, the woman slowly stood, her body tense with fear. "We don't have much time. We have to move." They began to run again, faster now, the footsteps of their pursuers echoing in the distance. The man felt a sharp sense of urgency, a desperate need to get to the storage facility. But as they rounded another corner, something stopped him dead in his tracks. A group of figures stood ahead, blocking their path. They were tall, dressed in dark, fitted suits that seemed to blend with the shadows, their faces obscured by masks. Their presence was chilling, like predators closing in on their prey. The man froze, his eyes locked on the figures, his mind screaming for an escape. The woman's hand tightened on his arm, but it was clear that there was no way around them. The figures were not just standing there, they were waiting for them. "Move," one of the figures said in a low, metallic voice. The sound of it sent a shiver down the man's spine. It wasn't a command, it was a warning. The man felt the woman's grip tighten on her daughter. The child remained eerily quiet, her large eyes wide and unblinking as she watched the figures. It was as though she knew exactly what was happening, what was to come. The woman stepped forward, her voice trembling but defiant. "You won't take her." The figures didn't respond. They just stepped closer, their movements synchronized, like a well-trained unit. The man's pulse thundered in his ears as he looked around, trying to find a way out. But there was no way around them. No more running. The woman's eyes flashed with fear, but also with something else, something he hadn't seen before. Determination. "They'll never stop coming for us," she whispered, her words barely audible. "But we won't let them win." The man's chest tightened as he realized what she meant. This wasn't just about escaping anymore. This was a fight for survival. And the stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. As the figures advanced, the woman moved forward, her eyes fixed on the child. She was ready for what was coming, and so was he. The ultimate choice, the cold air cut through the alley like a blade, its sharpness stinging his skin. The man stood at the edge of the street, his gaze fixed on the figures ahead of him, their shadowy forms growing closer with each passing second. The woman was beside him, her body tense, but her eyes no longer filled with fear. There was something else, now a steely resolve. She wasn't running anymore. She was prepared to fight. But what were they fighting for? The child, still in her arms, had remained silent throughout the entire chase, her wide eyes taking in everything, yet saying nothing. The man had thought that the child was too young to understand the gravity of the situation, but as he glanced down at her, he realized that she was far more aware than anyone could imagine. Her presence was calm, almost a calm, considering the chaos around them. "Are you ready for this?" the woman asked, her voice low and steady. The man didn't have an answer. He wasn't sure if anyone could be ready for what was about to happen, but he knew one thing: they couldn't go on running. The longer they did, the more they put themselves in danger. There had to be a way to end this. They had to make a stand, even if it meant everything would change. "We don't have a choice," he replied, his voice firm, but the words tasted like bitter resolve. They had reached the end of the street, a small, isolated square where the buildings loomed like silent witnesses. The woman took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the surroundings. The shadows seemed to move with them, whispering of the danger that had followed them every step of the way. She looked back at the man, her face unreadable. "They'll never stop," she said, almost to herself. "But I won't let them take her." The sound of footsteps grew louder. The figures were closing in. There was no more time to plan, no more time to escape. "Listen," the woman continued, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "I need you to make a choice. It's time. We can run, ... but they'll find us. Or you can help me protect her. And in doing so, we take a stand. We end this once and for all." The words hit him like a thunderclap. His chest tightened, and for a moment he felt as though the world had slowed down. The child, the woman, the figures, everything had brought them to this point, to this crossroads where there was no going back. The choice was his. The idea of continuing to run haunted him. What would that mean? More hiding, more fear, more running, until they were all exhausted, unable to keep up. The thought of leaving the child in danger, knowing what they would do to her, gnawed at his conscience. But then there was the other choice, the one that involved standing up, fighting back. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about taking a stand for something bigger than survival. It was about protecting the future. The child wasn't just a symbol of power. She was the future itself, and if they didn't protect her, the world would never be the same. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked her, though he already knew the answer. She nodded. "I've known this moment was coming. We can't run forever, but I can't do it alone." He took a deep breath, his hands shaking as the weight of the decision settled in his chest. For a brief moment, his mind flashed to the life he could have had before this all began, the normal, quiet life he had left behind. But it was too late for that. He had stepped into this world, and now there was no way out. "I'm in," he said finally, his voice steady. The woman's eyes softened for just a moment before she turned to face the figures approaching them. "Then let's end this." The sound of approaching footsteps turned into a low, almost unnatural hum, and the man's gaze shifted toward the dark figures emerging from the shadows. The collective was here. They had arrived, and they had come. For the child, the air was thick with tension. The woman stepped forward, her posture unwavering, holding the child in front of her like a shield. The man stood by her side, his mind racing with what they were about to do. They had no weapons, no armor, just their wits, their will, and a fierce determination to protect what was theirs. The figures stopped at a distance, their silhouettes still indistinct but clearly ominous. One of them stepped forward, a cold, mechanical voice echoing in the stillness. "You've run long enough," it said, its voice like metal scraping against stone. "Give us the child, now." The man's heart pounded in his chest, but his resolve was stronger than ever. He stepped forward, placing himself between the woman and the figures. "You'll have to go through me," he said, his voice calm but unwavering. The woman didn't speak. She simply tightened her grip on the child, her eyes locking onto the figure before them. She knew the risks. She knew the price. But this was it. This was the moment they either survived or they lost everything. The figure's response was a low, menacing laugh. "You think you can stop us?" it asked, as though amused by their defiance. But the woman's gaze never wavered. "I don't think we can stop you," she said softly. "I know we can." In that moment, as the figures advanced and the man braced for what was to come, he realized something deep inside. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for everything. The child, the woman, and the world they were fighting. For it all hinged on this one final choice, and he had made it. The battle was just beginning. The final showdown, the city around them felt like a distant memory now, a world left behind in the chaos of the past few hours. The man stood in the open square, the weight of what they were about to face pressing down on him like a storm ready to break. The woman stood beside him, her stance resolute, her eyes locked on the dark figures now encircling them. The child in her arms seemed untouched by the tension in the air, her wide eyes staring at the oncoming threat with a strange, almost knowing calm. The collective had come for them, and now there was no turning back. The figures were closing in, their movements slow but deliberate. Each step they took echoed in the silence, the sound of impending doom growing louder with every second. The man's heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He could feel the raw weight of the decision they had made. There was no escape, no more running. This was their stand, and it was all or nothing. A low voice broke the silence. "You're wasting your time," the figure leading the group said, its voice as cold as steel. "Hand over the child, and we can avoid unnecessary bloodshed. We are not your enemies. We're here for what's ours." The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't speak, but the man could feel the heat of her anger. He knew her resolve was as unyielding as his own now. They weren't backing down, not this time. "She's not yours," the woman finally spoke, her voice like ice. "She belongs to no one but herself, and we will fight for her with everything we have." The figure paused, tilting its head, as if considering her words. Then it stepped forward, its cold, mechanical eyes fixed on the child in her arms. "You don't understand, do you?" The figure's voice was a low growl. "She is the key. The power she holds can reshape everything. And you," it gestured toward the man, "you're simply in the way." For a split second, doubt flickered in the man's mind. Could he really fight these people? What if they were right? What if the child's abilities could indeed change the world? But then he looked at the woman, her face set in stone, and at the child, whose gaze seemed to pierce through the darkness itself. This wasn't just about them anymore. This was about something much bigger. "We will never let you take her," the woman said, her voice unwavering. The figures didn't respond immediately, but the hum of their machinery grew louder, their bodies tense. The air seemed to thicken, a pressure building around them, as if the very atmosphere was alive with the promise of what was to come. Without warning, one of the figures lunged forward, its movement fluid and swift, almost inhuman. The man instinctively stepped forward, his body reacting before his mind could catch up. He threw a punch, but the figure sidestepped effortlessly, its cold eyes never leaving him. It was like fighting a shadow, quick, relentless, and unforgiving. The woman was not far behind, her movements sharp and precise. She had trained for this moment, and now everything she had learned came to life. She moved with an agility that surprised even him, using her body to protect the child as she struck with a speed that made the figures falter. For a moment, the man could see the fear in their eyes, the realization that they hadn't expected this kind of resistance. But the figures didn't stop. They pressed forward, their coordination flawless. The man fought back, throwing every ounce of strength into his punches, but they seemed to be everywhere at once, darting in and out of his reach. He could feel his body tiring, but he refused to give in. He had made a promise he would keep it. Suddenly, a flash of light cut through the darkness. The woman had triggered something. A surge of energy rippled through the air, as if the very fabric of reality had been torn. The man staggered, feeling the heat of the energy rush past him, the sheer force of it knocking the figures back. The woman was glowing now, her hands raised, as if drawing on the child's hidden power. The child, still held in her arms, looked up at the woman, her eyes glowing with a strange light. For the first time, the man saw something different in her, a quiet, contained strength that radiated out like a beacon. She was the key. The power in her was undeniable. The figures reeled, clearly startled by the sudden surge of energy. They had underestimated them, underestimated her. But they weren't done. The figure leading the group stepped forward once more, its eyes narrowed in cold determination. "You don't realize the magnitude of what you're protecting," it said, its voice low and venomous. "She could save or destroy everything, and in the end, we will get her. It's only a matter of time." The man's eyes locked onto the figure, his body still aching from the fight. He couldn't let them win. Not now, not after everything they had been through. "You'll never have her," he said, his voice thick with resolve. "Not while I'm still standing." There was a moment of silence, brief pause where everything seemed to freeze. And then, with a roar, the figure lunged again, but this time, the woman was ready. She released a final, blinding burst of energy, the force of it sending the figures flying backward, their bodies crashing into the walls of the square. The light from her hands was so intense that it seemed to burn through the very air itself. The figures crumpled, defeated, and for a brief moment, the man thought it was over. But as the dust settled, he saw them begin to stir, their bodies slowly rising. This wasn't over. But for the first time, he felt the shift. The power had shifted in their favor. And the woman, with her child by her side, had proven that she wasn't just fighting for survival, she was fighting for the future. The figures stumbled back, their movements slower now. They had underestimated the woman's strength. They had underestimated the child. And now they would pay the price. The final confrontation wasn't just a battle for life or death, it was a battle for the fate of everything. And the man, standing beside the woman, knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. This fight wasn't over, but they had won the first round, and that was all that mattered.